Forspoken tries to show a new twist on the Alice in Wonderland formula. A woman mysteriously transported into an unknown land where now she must understand the world and figure out how to get home. With bad map design, clunky combat sections, and an overall underwhelming motivating factor, unfortunately Forspoken doesn't seem to understand how to handle a narrative built on this vision, and it tells a mostly forgettable story. Although setting high stakes, ultimately it fails to give a reason as to why the player should care or to provide a compelling conclusion. Hey folks, just to quickly interrupt, please like the video and hit the subscribe button, it would honestly help me out. Thanks so much. Alright, let's get back into it. In Forspoken, our protagonist Frey finds herself mysteriously transported into a magical land called Athia after stumbling through a portal. There she soon finds and bonds with a sentient arm brace called Cuff, and encounters a small group of survivors hidden in the last city that is free from a dangerous and mysterious toxicity in the air that has been infecting the lands. This relentless miasma that Frey calls the Break corrupts wildlife and transforms animals into mutated monsters. Of course, Frey being the only one not affected by the break, making her the ideal candidate to explore the lands, find the cause of the break, and to ultimately free the lands of this corruption. Now this concept is actually intriguing, and the world initially seems interesting. However, the story is mostly told through boring and unlikable characters, Frey being one of the worst. Completely stubborn, standoffish, who criticizes everyone everywhere, telling most people she meets to F off, followed by the almost nauseating, sarcastic Cuff, and their at first cringy, quirky banter which turns absolutely devious very quickly, as it is a constant non-stop elementary insult contest throughout the entire game. The characters in the world do not help this situation at all, as most of them almost immediately rely their entire tribe's protection on this woman they met 5 seconds ago. Of course, it also doesn't help the feeling of desperation when first they explain how the break will soon kill everything and everyone if Frey doesn't help, and 2 minutes later they ask her to mindlessly pet all the sheep as a side quest, completely destroying the sense of any urgency. So in the story, Frey is an orphan, and in the city of New York where the game starts Frey's journey, she always had troubles belonging to any community because of it, being in conflicts with both sides of the law. Once she is transported to Athia and learns of the people and the situation there, at first she is quite resentful of her fate. However, soon discovers that she is actually quite well suited for this world, and I thought this is where the whole belonging narrative will start, and will initially kickstart Frey's personality arc, from a moody teenager to a responsible and caring adult. While at the beginning she is completely annoyed with her situation, I thought that her wanting to belong will essentially motivate her to help these people, as she possesses certain traits that no one else does, essentially making her the chosen one, as some fantasy games would set up their characters. And this is where I was hoping this game to be something that I imagined. However, it didn't take long for me to realize that this is as far from the truth as it can be. The game tries to carry an emotional tale of suffering and desperation. However, the absolutely awkward, emotionless faces of almost all NPCs create a bit of a disconnect from what the music and dialogue wants you to feel and what your eyes actually see. Furthermore, this issue is further developed by how these characters are used to inspire Frey in her quest to help these people. For example, Frey decides to go on this god of war murderous vengeance spree for a character she literally met and has no emotional connection to, and this arc is also belittled by the fact that Frey doesn't want to be there in the first place, nor does she even want to help these people by her own choice. None of the characters are fleshed out in Forspoken. We don't get to know their backstory, nor do we really connect with them, so the way they can emotionally affect Frey doesn't always seem believable at all, which then makes the player feel completely emotionally disconnected from the story, making the missions feel like they are just another task to do. My entire playthrough was filled with moments where I was scratching my head thinking, yes, I get you're desperate, but why should Frey care, who literally isn't even in her own world to save? Forspoken never even attempted to deliver a motive or answer as to why Frey decided to help these people, while during gameplay she is so vocal about how much she doesn't care about anyone or anything in this world, and how this entire world isn't even her responsibility to bear. And while these are technically fair points, Frey's lack of heroism or charitable thinking takes away that tiny little motivation the player has to even care about this game. When your main protagonist doesn't even want to be in the game, it makes an uncomfortable playing session for the player, as if your little brother was in the room constantly nagging you about them wanting to do something else. When the story doesn't try to lock you into a forced emotionless conversation that can last, I'm not even kidding, sometimes 10 minutes, you are exploring the world of Athia. Now, traversal in this game is probably the most well done part. Frey's magical parkour seamlessly allows her to jump over any hazards or rubbles, and while this is a fun way to travel through areas, it isn't without its problems. Firstly, the ability to run and jump isn't very accurate, nor is it predictable in which angle Frey will leap, making platforming sections sometimes infuriating. Secondly, having combat sections in enclosed spaces become mind-numbing, as the same magic used for traversal is used for dodging also, and while how big or small the dodges are cannot be controlled and seem to be randomized, sometimes the camera can completely be kicked around in between walls and other environmental placements as it tries to follow Frey's dodging. Frey's fast movement encourages the player to have a more free-form style engagement with enemies. However, most of the spell actually rely on precision and timing. While dodging multiple enemies at once and the camera sometimes flying all over the place, it can be really hard to be precise and accurate with the timed events in combat, making the movement and the actual spell casting feel disjointed, and two mechanics do not complement each other in the slightest. In fact, most of the times the two parts of the game are actively fighting each other. So onto the combat itself. Frey starts off with absolutely boring magic spells, and we'll stick with these for the better part of the first 5 hours. This magic is called Earth, and essentially you will be able to throw rocks around in different ways, capacity, speed and chunks. By late mid-game, Frey would have unlocked the 4 main spells categorized, and that is when the combat can look amazing with different colors and particle effects, devastating monumental damage on many enemies at once, while both using normal spells, support spells and of course the super moves. The problem with combat are 2 major things. One of them being is that all enemies in the game, and there are actually a disappointing variety, have weaknesses to certain magic types. As soon as you meet one, Cuff is quick to blab about what that specific enemy's weakness is, getting rid of all kinds of experimentation for the player. At that point, it becomes just a mindless button smashing of the spells that corresponds with the enemy weaknesses, and all strategy there is to not forget to switch the magic group when another enemy variety shows up. Now, Forspoken was proud to announce that there are over 100 spells in the game, which is yes, technically true, but because of these category-based enemy types, really all you need is 4 spells, 1 in each category, to be then effective essentially against everyone. The game doesn't encourage you to use different spells in any given category to combine them or to multiply damage effects, as these amazing, potentially groundbreaking and innovative mechanics have been completely left out of the drawing board. Most boss fights are literally spell sponges, making you have to smash R2 as many times as you need to while dodging their attacks until they finally fall. The second problem with the combat in this game is the dodging itself. And no, it's not because it's horrible, it's actually because it's ridiculously forgiving. Just like parkour, where Frey automatically parkours over any obstacles, in combat it's just a matter of smashing the dodge button enough times for Frey to, in a visually impressive manner, dodge all projectiles going her way. This at first looks amazing, however with longer boss battles it becomes devious and quite boring, taking away any sense of challenge. While exploration is the best experience in the game, especially in the latter half of the game where the environments actually start to look rather impressive, and Frey has unlocked more ways to actually traverse the map, again it isn't without its problems. In this case it actually isn't a technical issue, it is more of a character and personality issue. Frey is about as hollow and two-dimensional as an NPC in Skyrim. Her one-liners such as "ha, too easy" after almost every single encounter, or "yeah, that's what you effing get," become ridiculously annoying, completely taking away from the fantasy setting of the game, as I am reminded of my middle school years. Frey's and Cuff's banter is non-stop in the game and constantly ruins exploration and immersion, as they constantly belittle each other for absolutely no reason. And while this could have been a resentment to love relationship similarly like Joe and Ellie's journey, it never actually developed and did the same boring, cringy, frustrating, quirky back and forth insults again and again and again. Every now and then Cuff would say something interesting about the environment or history of the place, which adds a little value to it being present. However, the same cannot be said for Frey, as in or out of cutscenes, she has the same demoralizing and unlikable personality. Frey being an orphan, having known nothing but abandonment, is the only aspect of her personality the game uses, and this is how Frey sees Athia. She doesn't want to help because no one helped her back home, and that toxic negligence she experienced is what she passes on. This is her personality arc in the whole game. The game doesn't explore the fact that Frey is black, her culture, or that she is a woman. These aspects of Frey being left out makes for an extremely lacking personality, and while the voice actor tried to do the best job they could, the writing simply restricted her from doing anything mildly impressive. If I look at Forspoken as purely a game that I don't want to play for the story but purely for its features and spells, which is what was an appeal to many of the people in the first place, I'd very much compare this game to the infamous Saga, specifically Second Son and First Light. Frey's movement is similar to the Neon Run. A lot of her spells resemble Delsin's smoke and concrete abilities, and the way you cast spells and use super moves just feel familiar immediately if you played the infamous games. Having said all this, Forspoken is a game I can very hardly recommend, because even when I take away the stale and uninteresting story, the incredibly huge map with its overwhelming amount of busy work, Frey's buggering personality, the small issues with the combat and exploration, even if you're only here for the spells, there is still plenty of issues that the game presents overall. I'd give this game a very average 6 out of 10, and I would strongly recommend that if at some point you would like to try this game out, play the demo that is available first, and wait for a significant discount on the game in the PSN store or in your local game retailer. Listen guys, I really hope you enjoyed this review, and thank you so much for watching. Like the video if you did, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.